Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, another day of heat and high winds. More fires are sparked across the state, and more folks are forced from their homes.
I'm Peggy Pico. New details tonight from City Beat's investigative report, Unprotected Custody, why San Diego County jails have the highest inmate death rate of California's largest jail systems. Then North County Transit District problems go beyond the Sprinter, our KPBS iNewsSource investigation on security, outsourcing, and unapproved contracts, the impact on writers, especially the disabled.
And from the mind of a UC San Diego linguist to a hit HBO series, a look at creating the languages in Game of Thrones. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. San Diego's been under a red flag warning today, and firefighters got several calls. The biggest one in Otay Mesa in the South Bay, just a few miles from Brown Field. The Harvest Fire burned about 120 acres this afternoon. No buildings were damaged, and no word yet on what caused it. New evacuation orders tonight for homes along the Ventura County coast, where a brush fire has burned more than 18,000 acres. Flames made it all the way to the coast, pushed by high winds and dry, hot weather.
It's pretty unbelievable for this time of year. Yesterday, where we're at was almost close to 100 degrees, 3% relative humidity, something we don't usually see along the coast, this early, anytime really.
More than 3,000 firefighters are battling fires across the state, and San Diego officials are reminding homeowners to be prepared.
The more you can do to protect your home, the more we can do, maybe provide that last 10% of defense that's really needed when the fire is really advancing strongly toward your home. But we can't do it without you.
Nearly 6 years ago, 500,000 county residents were ordered from their homes during the Witch Creek and Harris fires in 2007. The question now is, are you prepared when another one strikes? Firefighters and city officials gathered in Rancho Penasquitos to remind homeowners about the law to create 100 feet of defensible space around their property by clearing dead trees and shrubs and replacing them with fire-resistant plants.
The area around your house should have low-growing plants like these with little fuel to fan flames.
The reality is our firefighters and government can only do so much. There needs to be a self-awareness and responsibility on the homeowner, and if we do that, just by creating defensible space around your home, you increase the odds by 90% that your home will survive the next wildfire.
This isn't just about protecting your home and family, because fire can spread to your neighbor. And Chief Maynard says they take the threat seriously and give homeowners a month and a half to comply if given notice.
If we come out for a third time because you haven't done so, then we start to charge you $300 for subsequent inspections. We also involve the city attorney's office to ensure that we gain compliance.
While the vast majority of homeowners follow the law, this message is aimed at those who ignore it. And this week's low humidity and gusty winds are an early sign of more fire danger ahead.
Now, the Burn Institute has a new guide to help homeowners prepare for a wildfire. You can get a copy of this by going to their website at burninstitute.org. Mayor Filner's plan for managing traffic in Balboa Park is getting some support tonight. Filner wants to remove parking from the Plaza de Panama and close it to traffic on weekends. Council President Todd Gloria says he supports removing cars, but has questions about how the plan would affect nearby neighborhoods as well as park attendants. Council will discuss the budget proposal on Monday. San Diego's Old Central Library will close for much of the summer to start preparing for the new building in the East Village. On June 9th, the old library will close for 10 weeks. More than 1 million items have to be moved to the new location near Petco Park, scheduled to open September 28th. A charter school on the library's 6th and 7th floors will also open this fall. Governor Jerry Brown's plan to cut the state's prison population doesn't reduce it enough. Federal courts want California to reduce overcrowding by 9,300 inmates. Brown's plan falls more than 2,000 inmates short. It includes allowing violent offenders to become inmate firefighters and granting more early release credits. He also suggests paroling very sick and elderly inmates and increasing the use of drug treatment centers. The plan also calls for sending more inmates to county jails and possibly using private prisons. State prison officials say meeting the court's goal would mean freeing serious and violent offenders. San Diego City Beat recently investigated the number of deaths in our county jails. The series ends with a story of inmate violence. Peggy Pico finds out more about the dangers of protective custody.
In the 5 years between 2007 and 2012, 60 inmates died while in San Diego County jails. The high rate of death pushed San Diego to the top of the inmate mortality list among California's 10 largest jail systems. Here with details from her final in-depth investigative report on jail deaths is San Diego City Beat reporter Kelly Davis. Kelly, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Now, Kelly, what prompted you and City Beat reporter Dave Moss to do this very extensive 5-part series?
Well, it started off with the guy that I wrote about in the most recent piece. His name is Russell Hartsaw, and I was told about his death. He died in July 2011, and shortly after that, someone contacted me and said you should look into this, which I did. I started gathering as much publicly available information as I could find, and from there, started talking to Dave Moss, my colleague, about it, and he said, "Well, let's start looking at as many and all the people who died in jails." And we kind of set a parameter of 2007 through 2012, and crunching the numbers, contacting other jurisdictions, and found that San Diego, like you said, has the highest mortality rate among large jails in California.
This latest article, called Unprotected Custody, actually begins with the death of Russell Hartsaw, as you said. Tell us a little bit about him and how he died.
He was a 70-year-old man, very physically and mentally ill. He had been in protective custody, and even within protective custody, there's a further designation called Keep Separate All. So it's basically to protect the most vulnerable inmates from other inmates. And he had been in protective custody, apparently made a request to get out of it. We're not quite sure of the process, what was determined that allowed him to be put back into the general population. But shortly after that, he was transferred into a dorm-like cell with a group of inmates who took him to be a child molester. He was not
mistakenly
a child molester.
Took him to be a child molester.
And within 2 or 3 hours of him being transferred into that cell or that module, he was beaten to death, and it's just a really gruesome reading about how he died. Was not, it was very upsetting.
A 70-year-old man beat to death by a group of inmates because he was mistakenly thought to be a child molester. Yeah. Tell us more about these 60 people in this 5-year period who died. Some of the inmates, there was Russell Hartsaw. Were there any others that died at the hands of inmates and or deputies?
Russell was the only one that was clearly an attack by other inmates. There was one where a couple inmates got in a fight, and one guy died shortly after. But there were two deaths that Dave Moss looked at for one piece in our series that involved deputies descending on inmates. One of them, Tommy Tucker, he was mentally ill.
And that resulted in death.
Yeah, and basically they restrained him in such a way that he couldn't breathe and died.
What did the county sheriff say about these inmate death rates?
They took issue with the methodology we used to determine the death rate, but we use the same methodology that the Department of Justice uses, that the Centers for Disease Control uses, that allows us to compare San Diego County to other jails, San Diego County to the nation, and
most. There's only a handful, I understand, that use this sort of outdated system that the sheriffs are
none
using.
of the experts we talked to agreed with the county's way of calculating
deaths,
it. Yeah.
Who reviews inmate conditions and death rates in California jail systems?
Well, in San Diego County, there's the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, which is part of its responsibility as part of its duties is to look at all in custody deaths. And what we found was there was a period of time where they weren't being notified. The sheriff's department wasn't passing along to them each time an inmate died.
So right now, after this series and after this state, review, which happens routinely, where does it stand now? Is anybody investigating the death rates?
As far as we know, no. And for this story, we looked at what other counties have done when the death rate has triggered some red flags. And they bring in experts, they bring in consultants, they admit there's a problem, and the county sheriff has yet to do any of that.
All right. Kelly Davis, thanks for the update and this remarkable investigation.
Thank you.
Escondido politics just got more interesting. A two-term councilwoman plans to challenge Mayor Sam Abed next year. Olga Diaz is only the second Latino elected to the council, where 49% of the population is Hispanic.
I really aim to be the representative that actually listens and that hopefully can bridge between communities of interest in our city, and also to be a better ambassador of our city within our region.
Now, Sam Abed has been mayor since 2010. He's focused on creating a fertile business climate in Escondido. Diaz says she'll look for support among small businesses and the community. The jobs report from the Labor Department today was better than expected. 165,000 jobs added in the U.S. last month. Unemployment dropped to a four-year low of 7.5%. Stock prices soared on the news. Here's a look at the numbers. Problems at the North County Transit District continue to affect transit users and the agency's ability to perform its responsibilities. Peggy Pico has this update from our investigations desk.
North County's commuter train Sprinter hasn't run since early March after state inspections found its brakes were non-compliant. Now the North County Transit District, or NCTD, in charge of the train is under further scrutiny after several audits reveal alarming concerns over security, maintenance, and transportation for the disabled. Brad Racino of iNewsSource joins me with new details uncovered in his ongoing investigative reports of NCTD. Brad, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Now, your most recent investigation revealed a number of problems at North County Transit District. Tell us what some of the top ones are.
Well, to recap, this all started out with looking into security, and we found a number of problems with the oversight of the security officers. Then the Sprinter shutdown happened, and that had to do with maintenance and oversight there. We found problems in turnover internally in upper management and NCTD. We also found some questionable consulting things that were done. So those were the main ones.
A lot of red flags. And now the apparent problems, these problems actually affect thousands of North County Transit users. For instance, tell us a little bit about this Sprinter being shut down. How has that impacted commuting and traveling and these riders?
Well, the Sprinter shut down, as you know, on March 9th, and what NCTD has done is instituted a bus service replacement. Those buses, even by NCTD's own admission, do not run nearly as well on time. They have to deal with traffic. It's affected a lot of people, but that shutdown came because of a state inspection that found faulty brakes and faulty brake rotors, I should say.
In the North County Transit District's Executive Director, Matt Tucker, he actually has outsourced several of these jobs, and one of the main concerns is what happened when he outsourced Lyft. Tell us what Lyft is and what happened.
Sure. Lyft is the district's paratransit service. That's a word that just means that it's for mainly disabled passengers, also elderly, but it's for people who can't navigate the public transportation system. What happened with that was they gave it to a private company called ALC in 2011. Last summer, they had an internal audit done of the Lyft service, and it came back with a lot of findings, a lot of bad service things that they found. One was that they were stranding disabled passengers at their work centers hours early, picking them up hours late. Dispatchers' attitudes were horrible. There was a number of issues with this outsourcing, with this service.
And the problem with leaving the disabled stranded at their jobs, part of the problem is those facilities had to stay open longer. So it had this trickle-down effect.
Right. They had to keep staff on hand. Otherwise, it was a liability. So they had people that would have to show up hours early and stay hours late after work to make sure these people found their rides and got home safe.
And for the general population, for the writers, security was also outsourced. As you said, this sort of started off the whole thing. What happened there?
Yeah, security has been outsourced for a long time. What happened, though, is apparently over many, many years, there's been no one watching over the contracts and no one actually going in and looking at these officers and their training files and seeing that they're prepared to do the job that North County is paying millions of dollars each year for them to do. What we found was that the vast majority of them didn't know, of the officers didn't know how to respond to very common things every day, or also major emergencies.
We talked to Matt Tucker here. You were with us, and he denied any problems when it came to the brakes. What did he say about this outsourcing, about these new problems that have surfaced?
Well, we had a long discussion a few days ago as far as the lift audit that I brought up, and in the audit it said the main problem was the turnover within North County. He seemed to think that the audit didn't say that. He found fault with a lot of the things that we've been saying, but he stands by the outsourcing. He's always stood by it. And it did, in the beginning, save the district from some financial peril. They were looking at a very bad situation coming up.
There's some contracts that were also $1.7 million in contracts that were also, I guess, awarded without board approval. Tell us a little bit about those.
Sure. As an executive director, Matthew Tucker has the authority to approve contracts up to $100,000. What we found was that during his first 4 months at the job, he had approved $1.7 million to 13 different consulting agencies and people. A few of those were his colleagues that we found up in San Jose. I asked him about this the other day, and he said to imply that there is any conflict of interest would be malicious and defamatory, but that's what we found.
Who provides oversights for those contracts?
Well, they now have a former accountant who is now their contractual oversight. I don't know his exact position, but he has been doing compliance reviews and monitoring, and I think they've just hired a couple more people. So they're hiring people as time goes by to take a look at these things.
Yesterday, the NCTD board met, and what happened? You were at that meeting.
A couple things happened. They met publicly after they had an internal review of Matt Tucker's performance. They came out. Bill Horn said nothing but great things about Tucker. Said anybody that has any criticism about him doesn't know what they're talking about. Then they spent about 10 minutes going over a PowerPoint on our last story on the Sprinter allocation of funding. They said that it was not true. They had their auditor come in and actually take a look at it. They provided the audit report to the public. But funny thing is, when we got out of that meeting, I went through the audit report and saw that it didn't actually talk about any of the studies that we mentioned. I called the auditor, and he confirmed that he actually never looked at any of the studies that we brought up in the story.
Okay. And just a sidebar on that meeting, Matt Tucker was also up for about a $250,000 increase in his salary. Did you hear anything about that?
No. His salary would be increased too. That was supposed to happen last December. Okay. We don't have an actual number for how much he gets paid because they won't tell us.
Yeah, they took it off their website. I understand. So, all right, Brad Racino, thank you very much, and I want to let folks know that they can see your entire report, your investigative reports on North County Transit District at kpbs.org/transit. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, the latest jobs numbers, employment challenges for older workers, and Michael Pollan on the importance of cooking. That's Friday on the PBS News Hour.
When the creators of the hit HBO show Game of Thrones needed a made-up language, they hired a linguist who graduated from UC San Diego. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone finds out how you make up a language.
In this episode of the NBC comedy The Office, the character of Dwight teaches Aaron how to speak Dothraki.
Dothraki is the native tongue of the nomadic, warmongering horse lords of Essos. I throat rip.
Fourth Agendak.
You throat rip.
Fourth Agendi.
He, she, it throat rips.
Fourth Agenda.
More of a barbaric growl.
Fourth Agenda.
Louder, you're shouting it from the back of a horse.
Fourth Agenda.
UCSD grad David Peterson was delighted when he saw that episode. He's a fan of The Office. He also created the Dothraki language for HBO's Game of Thrones. Peterson recently visited his alma mater to talk with students in the linguistics department. Before the lecture, he explained why he enjoys building a language from scratch.
When you're creating a language, if you're going to do it, responsibly, if you're going to try to really create something that's authentic, it's one of the most intellectually rigorous exercises I've ever undertaken. And to me, that's really the appeal.
Peterson started with the source material for the TV show, George R.R. Martin's series of epic fantasy novels, A Song of Ice and Fire. The Dothraki culture guided Peterson in creating the words.
With Dothraki, I remember one of the first words I coined was the word for horse, which was hrazef.
The Dothraki are expert riders, and horses are central to their culture. Peterson also created a phonetic and grammatical structure for the language.
I kept in mind what it was that English speakers would be expecting from the language, and also, what would sound, what would sound cool, what would sound menacing. And that means something different for an English speaker than it does for somebody who's a native speaker of Arabic or Japanese or Chinese. So I was working with kind of the expectations of English speakers in mind.
Peterson met George R.R. Martin at a book signing in San Diego. That's when he realized he got one crucial pronunciation wrong.
I'm like, oh, that's George R.R. Martin. Should I introduce myself? And then I just said, hi, my name is David Peterson. I'm like, hi, I'm the guy that did the Dothraki language. And he's like, oh, so you're the one that did Dothraki. And I'm like, wow. I was way off. I would never have guessed that.
Space, the final frontier.
Creating fictional languages for TV shows and movies became popular after the success of Star Trek's Klingon. Grant Goodall teaches language construction at UCSD. He says Klingon set a high bar for Hollywood.
So now that seems to be the new normal. If you're going to have a science fiction series or fantasy series, that you have to have, and if you're going to have some alien tribe or some alien species, they have to have their own language, and it can't just be gibberish that the actors make up on the spot. It has to be something that is created with some care.
Goodall speaks Esperanto, which dates back to the 19th century.
Saluton, mia nomo estas Grant.
Esperanto was designed to be easy to learn in the hope it would be adopted all over the world. Its goals were lofty, to achieve universal brotherhood. Goodall started studying it at 13 when he joined an Esperanto club in San Francisco. Today, there are anywhere between 500,000 and 2 million Esperanto speakers. It's one of the most successful and enduring constructed languages. But Goodall's command of Esperanto doesn't stop him from dabbling in Klingon,
Nuknech,
Dothraki,
Math,
or Na'vi,
Kalte,
the language in the movie Avatar. Most linguists like Goodall and Peterson end up teaching in universities, but Peterson has carved out a real niche for himself. He's created another fictional language for the latest season of Game of Thrones. And the Sci-Fi Network hired him to create an alien language for the show Defiance. Meanwhile, Peterson hopes to build the Dothraki language to 10,000 words.
If you're going to do it right, if you're going to be creating a language, it pretty much, if you're going to really put your all into it, it can pretty much take up your entire life.
Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Well, cool is cool in any language. We're expecting a cool down this weekend. The Weather Service is calling for possible showers, in fact, by Sunday, with a slight chance of thunderstorms by Monday, when temperatures will be in the 60s for most of the county, except for the desert, 80s and 90s there. Space for Art's mission is to support artists by providing a space where they can live, work, and show their art to the community. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando checks out the group's latest exhibit exploring the occult and metaphysical.
Space for Art grew out of a need San Diego artists felt to create affordable studios and innovative exhibition spaces for their work.
A little over 3 years ago, we started this space, and before that, we were a committee of people that were looking to build a permanent affordable housing for artists in San Diego. Then we decided to lease a space and open up what we call a pilot project.
This pilot project is located at 15th and J in a trio of adjacent warehouses in San Diego's East Village.
When you come down to the East Village, what you see is a lot of warehouses, and you definitely get this urban feel. That's kind of interesting for artists, this sort of ungentrified area where anything is possible.
What's been possible is providing 32 work studios and 5 work-live studios, as well as exhibition and performance space. It's been doing all this while awaiting nonprofit status in order to apply for funding.
Beyond that, we've just been surviving on the rents from the studios. So basically, this has really been an artist-run project.
One of the things that I find so exciting about Space for Art is that it really celebrates the emerging artist in San Diego, bringing together all kinds of diverse media and celebrating the fact that there are new ways to embrace ideas and thoughts.
Or to challenge them, as with the new exhibit, The Unknown.
We selected artworks that show art's ability to deal with the unknown, the invisible, the extraordinary, or the supernatural. The unknown, right? It can't be defined, and yet art tries to show people something that might be overlooked normally. It's not literally interactive, but it is the kind of work that you want to spend a little bit of time with. If you do spend a bit of time with the work, something may unfold or reveal itself to you. I think it's pretty compelling stuff.
So if you're in the mood to explore the unknown, Space for Art is the place to be. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
The Unknown runs through May 25th at Space for Art in San Diego's East Village. Tonight's stories are online at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.